Welcome everyone to this panel discussion about impact of COVID on women's lives, both home life as well as business lives. I know a lot has changed in the past 1.5 years, and this panel of esteemed guests is going to discuss what are the impacts of that on women's lives specifically. Before I start, I have a set of slides and a video to share. And we are going to watch that video together. Following that, I have some statistics to show, and then we start our discussion. So here we go. Are you able to see my screen?
Yes.
Okay.
Produced by our multimedia team about the moment we're living in.
We are separated when we need each other the most. We stay apart to protect one another. But we are also coming together in new ways to show appreciation. To inspire. To rally together to help the vulnerable and those on the front lines. As with people, countries must come together too, to help the poorest and most vulnerable, and those in societies on the brink or in the throes of conflict, to help those least able to respond. The World Bank Group is proud to be part of an international response to the coronavirus pandemic. We will deploy up to $160 billion over the next 15 months to help countries with the greatest need, to strengthen health systems, to increase surveillance on the disease, to help companies continue to operate and workers to keep their jobs, to speed the time to recovery, and to prepare for when we can close the distance between us. Together, we can make a difference. Together, we can achieve results that change lives.
I hope you enjoyed that video. I have put the link to the slides in the chat. And I have some statistics following that. So this one is a number that is given by the World Bank. And as the video said, the World Bank has already done some research on the impact on women's lives. And the conclusion is that the women who were already earning less are the ones who were impacted the most by means of the pandemic. Since these are the women who were frontline workers, restaurant workers, people who were helping house helps, and from low income categories, because they couldn't go back to work. And the COVID-19 put them in a small basket of only being in a secluded environment. They could not sustain that for a longer time. So as you see here, there are 195 million men who were before COVID, who were already poor, but it increased to 221 million men. And for women, there were 206 million women before COVID who were already in the lower level of the society, lower strata of the society. And that went down to 232 million women. So women and men living in poverty in 2021 is much greater than before the pandemic in 2019. And this slide shows about the number of cases that we had of confirmed coronavirus cases. There were about 185 million. And out of that, 4 million deaths happened. The vaccines are administered right now to 3 billion people, but there are still 4 billion to go. So that shows the impact of this pandemic. So according to Melinda Gates, pandemic has most impacted low-income women from the poorest countries. It has magnified gender inequality much greater. Already we had women who were complaining that they were not getting equal pay, but now it has worsened. So how do we solve this problem? We, as with the group of esteemed panelists that we have, are going to look at this problem from our own perspectives. And I'm going to stop sharing right now so that we all can see each other and open it up for discussion. So today we have, let me pull up that. We have Janet Jansen, who is a life coach, a trainer, and public speaker. In May 2021, she won the second place title with Toastmasters International Table Topics Contest for District 101. Thank you, Janet, for being here. She is a business entrepreneur since 2015, and she teaches how to have more power play purpose in your personal and business lives. The second panelist is Helen. Helen Josephine retired in 2017 after 10 years with Stanford University as head of the Terman Engineering Library. Her library career included working in the corporate library at Intel and working in academic libraries at Menlo College and University of Hawaii, at Moana and Arizona State University. She brings with her a lot of experience of meeting people and from different walks of life. Welcome, Helen. We have Lakshmi. Lakshmi has been in the teaching line for the most part of her life. She worked as a swim instructor and administrator in an early education school, an instructional assistant at an elementary school, and as a substitute teacher. So she comes from the teaching background. So she knows how girls' mentality changes as they grow and what are their needs and how it affects the society. Welcome, Lakshmi. We have Anita, who works at VMware and is a distinguished speaker and founder of the Women Lead Toastmasters. And I'm glad she agreed to join us and she found the time to be with us. Welcome, Anita. We have Karen. Karen is also the founder of Women Lead Toastmaster and an esteemed speaker and written a book which is very well sought after by women in leadership positions. Welcome, Karen. So let's get started. So I'll go in the order that I see on my screen. So I'll go from Karen, Lakshmi, Anita, Helen, and Janet. So Karen, how do you think the pandemic has affected women's lives? And do you have any personal stories or stories from other people whom you have seen and want to share?
There's a couple of things, Priya, that I wanted to talk about. I did a little study, and back in March of 2021, just in the US, 2.3 million women lost their jobs compared to only 1.8 million men. And people say, well, why did that happen? And Priya, you talked a little bit about some of that, but I wanted to show a couple of things about that in terms of how it happened and what industries were hit the hardest. So it turns out the industries that have the highest population of women were the ones that were hit the hardest. And that was where women, like you said, completely had to quit, right? There was no infrastructure and everybody went home. So they were not people who could work remotely, if you will, which is a huge proportion of women, and also a huge proportion of women in the lower income scales, right? So down at the poverty level, it gets pretty awful. The other piece that happened to us is the whole care infrastructure collapsed. People were sending their kids to daycare. They had these arrangements, and we had to pull all that back home, and everybody went home to hide literally from the virus while we developed a vaccine. So, and what women do in particular, all people do this, when you put them under a lot of pressure and you threaten their livelihood, we crawl into our shells and protect. And we protect our families. And so a lot of women who were looking at this situation and said, particularly if they had small children at home, you know, it is impossible to work even if you can work remotely and help a 6-year-old be online in class. I mean, you know, this is not tenable, right? If you've seen a 6-year-old, you'll know exactly. You know, I was lucky. I had high schoolers and, you know, they were good, but the little ones, you couldn't do it. So the whole care infrastructure that we created collapsed because it really relied on women and outside sources. So, you know, we really have to rethink how that's going. And I want to close with just a tiny piece. I wrote an article on the Great Resignation, which is something that's happening right now. And it's an article, it's in Medium if anybody wants to go look it up. But you can go up and put that article and take a look at it. But we're not done yet. Women are going to be quitting in droves. And they're doing that because they've rethought their lives and they've rethought what is the most important thing to me. And it's coming out family every time. And so there are a lot of employers, and I'll share some stats later on that I think are, let's call it delusional, that thinking we're going to go back to the way it was before. That is not going to happen. So it's going to be interesting going forward. Thank you.
So I do agree with Karen on a lot of points, especially when you said the women stayed back. Yeah, this is happening. A lot of people, especially the essential workers, if they have no support, you know, nobody to take care of the kids, you can't leave kids. I'm talking from the teacher's point of view. A kid cannot be left alone in the house. 12 years, they say that's the rule, but if they're 14, one of the teachers said that's the time when the parents have to really quit the job and be with the kids. So it was very difficult. And people who were essential workers, they had just two options. Either they were part-time or quit the job. So that made a lot of financial, that, you know, the women had to go through a lot of financial stress and mental stress. That created problem in those families, you know. If the family mother is not happy, obviously the family is not happy. Second, I live in an apartment, and I differ a little bit here. Some of the women, especially my sister, she says that working from home was a blessing for her because she was able to, she had the, you know, she was earning, she had job security. That was a plus for her. And she was able to spend time with her kids. She was able to see them grow. And, you know, most of us, we have not had that experience. And she said, you know, this is going to stay with her for life. So that was one thing. And for me personally, I'm not a young mother, but my daughter came back home after a long time because everything is work from home now. So it was easy, and we share at least one meal a day as a family. It was just nice. I didn't have a job because I was a substitute teacher. They didn't need me, but this was a different experience. I really enjoyed it. Back to you.
Thank you, Lakshmi. Anita.
Yeah, so whatever Lakshmi and Karen shared, yes, the stats is out there as part of McKinsey study. It shows that 4 times as many women compared to men dropped out of workforce during COVID. So it was due to daycare, all the work, home life balance that they had to deal with. So they had to drop out and take care of that. So for as working in the high tech industry, one of the things I believe is it also depends on how much flexibility your employer can give you. When you have this remote work culture, so I saw that it was a change, not only for people who had children, school-going children, even for the people who did not have children, like who had children who were grown up out of the house. It was a change for everybody, men and women alike. Everybody was dealing with this. So with respect to pandemic, it was about the kids. So how do you share the work between your family, whether it is the husband and the wife sharing the responsibilities of the kids. So I could see, like, as we were on the Zoom meetings, we made people comfortable saying that, hey, if your kid is out there asking for something, just please go take care of the kid, answer a question, and then come back to the meeting. Or if you have to go attend to certain business of the kid, and if a meeting needs to be moved, yes, that's okay to do, because we want to be flexible and make sure that people can take care of these kind of areas. For me personally, my kids are both in college, and I am a people's person. I used to love to go to work every day and interact with people. It was a big change for me. And the other change I found a lot was spending a lot of time on other work at home, which I had help on. So it was all of a sudden, it was, although my husband was also helping me out, but it was for both of us. There was a lot of things around the house. It's house cleaning. It's about cooking. So you can't even go out and eat. You have to have all 3 meals cooked at the house. So all of a sudden, this the work increased, and it's a big, with the support of your family, and how others can help you, and the flexibility that your employers can provide you. I think we can enable that.
Thank you, Anita. The next question is, how would you caregiving demands have risen, so that is causing enormous stress, but what is your advice to women about juggling home and work responsibilities? I'll start with Helen.
Thank you so much for the question about juggling home and work responsibilities. I think all three of the previous speakers touched on that quite a bit, in that in most environments, the main job of caregiving falls on the woman of the house. And so they bore the brunt of making all of those decisions and being the person to stay home to take care, because children couldn't go to school, and they had to supervise them at home going to school. My own personal experience was with calling to some, and I'm sorry to say, someone's coming to my door. I'm going to have to mute and come back.
The hazards of Zoom.
You can move on to Janet.
Yeah, Janet, you can take the same question.
Okay.
Any advice for juggling a home and work responsibilities?
That's it. This is the panel. We're flexible. I get that. Okay. What I want to share is a story of one woman named Ashley. She was in a women's networking group that I was in. She and her husband had a really budding business. They were in the diversity inclusion business that was creating videos inside companies. They had a lot of promise. And then, of course, when COVID happened, that business declined drastically. But as a mother of 2 kids, both under 7 years old, she then had to take on, whether it was agreed upon or not with her partner, but she then had to take on more responsibility. Consequently, I think what happened is, between not getting any business from the industry, and then also through her sharing and discussions, having to work with them and to take care of them. Maybe one was in kindergarten, so she had some teaching that she had to do. It was extremely stressful versus the contrast of someone who is white privilege, daughter is fully grown, no pets, none of that I was not affected at all. The information that we're learning here from this panel and from the research is extremely important, because there's a tremendous amount of ignorance on my part of not having this kind of information. So I think this is a really vital discussion about the imperatives that are going on with the genders. And I have other things that I could share that aren't related to this question, but I was quite enlightened. Thank you.
Thank you, Janet. So caregiving is a problem. Then you have the second problem, which is how do you juggle the home and work life? We discussed a little bit about that. Karen, do you want to take the same question, or you want to move on to the third one?
Oh, I love this question.
Okay, go ahead.
This I have some additional.
Okay, go ahead.
For you. So one of the things that I think is most important is that we've seen, and they did a study, and let me show you the survey responses. What they looked at in this study was the difference between what the leadership at companies saw and what the frontline employees without decision-making authority saw. So business leaders were 23% more likely to be thriving, 11% more likely to continue building relationships with colleagues, even though we're physically separated, 19% more leadership, 17% higher earning incomes, and 12% taking vacations. This gap tells me that the leadership at many companies is confused about where the rest of the world is. And I'm listening now to CEOs of banks and things, you know, Citibank saying, you will come back to work at the office. You will, you will, you will. And I've got news for them. People are quitting in droves. And it's not just, first it was surveys saying they were thinking about quitting, right? Now let's look at some quit rates. So this shows the industry quit rates. I have to get close to it to see it. So, and of course, accommodation and food services, right? That's an area that's been super hard hit. Restaurants are open, closed, right? Retail trade, the stores, the same thing. But that third category with a really high quit rate, business and professional services. These are your engineers, your other people working at big companies, much higher quit rate than average. And I think a lot of that is driven by the fact that they've now said, okay, I can work from home. And if employers continue to force people to come back to work, they may be forcing people to quit. And I think they really need to be aware of that, because it's really costs a lot of money to retrain people and re-get them back into the workforce. So they should really work at how well they can do these things. Thanks.
Thank you, Karen. I like the slides that you showed. It would be nice if you can send it over to me. I want to collate everything and send it out to the panelists after the meeting. My next question is, what are the lessons that we learned from our own personal experiences or from statistics that we have read about how we can fight back when we come back out of COVID? How can we fight back as women? And this can be, you can target low income women, you can target women who are not so low income, but what are the strategies that we can adopt? Anything that you think of the top of your head. So this is for Lakshmi. You're on mute.
First of all, what I learned from this pandemic is don't take anybody lightly, especially based on their size. Did you see this virus? How much havoc it has created. So that is the first thing. And to get back, like what I'm not dealing with statistics now, though I'm a statistics student, but I'm just saying it's my opinion. See, from my side, I know when I go back to work, I might not be able to go back into teaching. I might have to think of something different because I don't want to be unemployed for long. So I took this opportunity to educate myself. So I joined courses. I did some Python, SQL, and kind of courses. This helped me. And to keep me sane, I joined Toastmasters, which I don't think I would have joined if I had been working. That initiative, I wouldn't have taken it. But now, and I joined it and I'm hooked on it, right? I really enjoy. And like Karen was asking me yesterday, what are you planning to do with this skill of talking and telling stories? I started wondering, what can I do? Something new, right? So because I met friends on online, I was able to think, right? That gave me an opportunity. So I always feel that even if you have a break, you should try to get into some other direction, take it positively and move on. So I think we will come out of it as better humans. Yes, we will. And one thing I learned, time management. Oh, in the beginning, even though I was just studying, I thought I had the whole day for myself. I'll do it coolly. But by the end of the week, I realized my work had piled up. So, time management is very important. I learned that. So I think I'll be better at work wherever I go afterwards. Back to you.
Yeah.
That's a very good tip, Lakshmi. Time management and being open, have a growth mindset, learn something new, make new friends, step into the step outside your comfort zone to learn. So that's a very good tip. Anita, the same question.
It's about managing change, right? As I talked about myself, I'm a people's person. I had to go into office every day. And when this pandemic came in, I was thinking it will be around for only 2-3 days. I don't need to pick up my monitor or chair or anything. I'll just work in my temporary setting and work from there. But when it was there for a long haul, then it's about, getting yourself situated and then making sure you can manage this change and work productively. Okay, so that's one thing. If there is a change, so we have to have a mindset on managing this change in a most effective way. For example, so that we are more productive. That's when I decided, okay, I have to go and I should set up my office. No matter, I don't know how long this remote place would be. I have to make the best out of it. The other thing is, we are in a Zoom era, and we were in a Zoom era for a long time. So it's also about, how do you build connections? How do you see the body language of people? So a lot of times we get onto Zoom, everybody's camera is off. It's like talking to nobody. So one of the things that I learned when I started doing too many Zoom meetings, okay, I need to turn on my Zoom, whether it is my exercise class or anything else, so that the person on the other side can see that there is really a person on the other side. So, and it leads you to building connections. So it's, if we have virtual tools, so how do we go about making the most effective use of it, so that we can still build that personal touch, personal connection that we would do in a normal setting. So at least we need to start thinking in those terms. The third one is, I started letting some of the things go, because with pandemic, there were so many things which were at home, which were at work. So if I had to focus on work, if there were deadlines, I would focus on that. If the cleaning is not done, so if we would just punt it. Maybe it's not every 2 weeks, it's around every 3 weeks. My husband and I would go and make a schedule, like, okay, we will just focus on this particular area for this particular weekend, and then next weekend we will take care of something else. It's also about, how do you go about letting some of the things go, so that and giving yourself some space, so that you don't have to do everything at once. Focus on the things which are more important, and then there might be certain things which can come later. And my advice to other women, whoever is out there, when a change comes in, embrace change and make the best out of it. You don't have to do everything perfectly. You don't have to do everything at one time. Just prioritize.
Thank you, Anita. Embrace change is a wonderful suggestion and wonderful tip for our listeners. Helen, let's go to the next question. So we talked about the different challenges we faced at the time of the pandemic: caregiving, managing work, managing home, ideas for that, lessons that we learned from personal experiences. What about the touchy topic of women who are stuck at home with an abusive partner, violence on women? So this pandemic has aggravated that. So any ideas or any suggestions on what can be done better? Are women groups helpful? Will they help the women to open out? How do you deal with such a kind of situation?
Well, I think that there has been an increase in abusive relationships because of the stresses that have happened in regard to sheltering at home and changing of work patterns, loss of jobs. All of these other stressors have added to that. So as a society, we need to have more opportunities for women and men to have counseling readily available. My sister and I decided to move in together and share a house. And I can see that there might be more of those co-living arrangements. And again, embrace change and be open to different types of situations that can be supportive. You know, there was the phrase a few years ago, it takes a village, you know, to raise a child. And in a sense, it takes a village to be a functioning society. We all need to help each other and reach out, be available, take on extra, share responsibilities. I think there were a lot of neighborhood co-ops that started happening, like your two kids can come to my house for an afternoon and give the mom a break, that sort of situation, where before you just sent them all off to school or just all off to play in the backyard. Now you had to kind of have a pod of people that you knew were safe, had been vaccinated or had been taking care of their health. Many of those social society nets, I think, need to be re-examined now in light of what has happened. And strengthening those community bounds would be the first place to start. And that is strengthening our community resources wherever we are living. So thanks for the question.
We can't hear you.
Oh, yeah. Thank you, Helen. You talked about helping each other, reach out to your friends, find out if anybody is in trouble, help them out. There'll be more changes in the societal structure. I think I see that happening more as more and more people are being more brave enough to step out of their problems, speak about it, and embrace change. Thank you, Helen. Janet, the same question. And then we'll have a concluding slide.
I wanted to say that what has become really evident is that this global pandemic has really shown us the weaknesses in our local governments, the social structures, support groups, resources. So we're really faced with, actually in a positive way, a spotlighting where we need to strengthen all of these institutions and resources and things. And you know, and it's a heavy load for all of us. In terms of the abusive types of behaviors that have happened, I'm certainly not an expert in that area. And I do believe the stats on that it totally increased. So I don't have much to say, but there was something that I noticed through the research that I explored, and I think it shows a huge weakness. I noticed that through the information on the economic impact about women not making as much as men, and it brought me back to the movie 9 to 5. And when I looked at that, that was made 41 years ago. And the discussion then was this gap, this pay gap, and we're still faced with it today. It kind of incensed me to think that we're still dealing with that. And so I'm hoping that there is more proactive legislation that happens, because indeed, if women were making more money today, some of these issues would not be an issue, I believe. So I wanted to just bring that up. It was lacking in this research. We talk about economic gaps, we talk about labor gaps, but what the heck? What are we doing still about making sure that we raise the level of income to compare with men.
Thank you, Janet. So gender inequality has been a plague, has been a pandemic that has affected us for a long time. And I think women have to step up and do something to change that situation, change the societal thinking, change the structure, have more support groups, and let the government or let the local bodies intervene to help women who are in those very touchy situations.